Agnes wrestled the protesting gearshift of her Ford pickup, finally coaxing it into park. The engine coughed a final, smoky breath before shuddering into silence. Around her, polished chrome reflected the afternoon sun in blinding bursts. Every car, Jaguars, BMWs, even a low-slung Ferrari, looked as if it had been born in a showroom, never knowing the indignity of a gravel road or a muddy field. Her truck, lovingly nicknamed Betsy, sat like a rusty, honest bulldog amidst a pack of sleek, pampered greyhounds. Agnes smoothed down the floral print of her dress, the fabric a little faded but clean and smelling faintly of lavender. She climbed out of Betsy, the familiar squeak of the door hinges a jarring note in the otherwise hushed atmosphere. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the imposing glass doors of Prestige Motors. The air inside was cool and scented with something that smelled vaguely of money and expensive leather. Light glinted off marble floors, and hushed conversations hummed in the background. Agnes felt a flush rise in her cheeks. This was intimidating. It felt like stepping onto a movie set, one where she was definitely an extra who'd wandered in from the wrong film. A woman sat behind a curved desk that looked like it was made of a single, impossibly smooth piece of ivory. Her hair was sculpted into a perfect wave, and her nails were lacquered a shade of red that screamed power. She didn't look up immediately, instead tapping away at a keyboard with an air of bored efficiency. Agnes waited patiently, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Finally, the woman looked up, her gaze sweeping over Agnes with an assessment so swift and thorough it felt like a physical touch. A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps disdain, crossed her face before it settled into a practiced, professional smile. "May I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice cool and precise. Agnes swallowed. "Yes, I was hoping to talk to someone about trading in my truck." The smile didn't waver, but Agnes could sense a shift in the air, a subtle lowering of the temperature. "And what kind of vehicle are you interested in?" "Well," Agnes hesitated, "I was hoping to get something newer, something reliable." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the showroom. "Maybe a small sedan?" The receptionist's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to Agnes. "And the trade-in?" Agnes pointed towards Betsy. "That's her. The Ford pickup." The receptionist's gaze lingered a moment longer, a silent, unspoken question hanging in the air. A long pause stretched, thick with unspoken judgment. The smile became a thin, almost imperceptible line. "I see," she said finally. "Please have a seat. I'll see if someone is available to assist you." She turned back to her computer, the dismissal clear in her posture. Agnes sat on the edge of a plush, modern chair, feeling smaller than ever. A salesman's judgment. Bryce Harrington plastered a smile on his face, the kind he reserved for the walk-ins, the ones who hadn't scheduled appointments and probably couldn't afford the floor mats, let alone a car. He sauntered toward Agnes, her simple denim dress and worn boots screaming low commission, even from 20 feet away. "Afternoon, ma'am," Bryce drawled, extending a hand she hesitantly shook. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Bryce Harrington, at your service. Looking for something special today?" Agnes's gaze drifted from Bryce's shiny shoes to the hulking monstrosity he called a dealership. "Well, I was hoping to trade in my truck and maybe get something newer." Bryce followed her gaze to the battered Ford pickup parked near the service entrance. The paint was faded, and a healthy patch of rust bloomed above the rear wheel well. He circled it slowly, his nose wrinkling imperceptibly. "That's a classic," he managed, injecting a generous dose of sarcasm into the word. He kicked the tire a low, hollow thump. "What year is this dinosaur?" "It's a 98, Agnes replied, a touch of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "It's been a good truck. Reliable." Bryce scoffed internally. Reliable? It looked like it was held together by duct tape and prayer. Right? Well, let's be realistic here. With that kind of mileage and wear and tear, we're probably talking scrap value. Maybe a couple $100. He waved a dismissive hand. "Now, what kind of budget are we working with today?" Agnes hesitated, her brow furrowed. "I hadn't really thought about a budget. Just something practical. Something that gets good gas mileage." Bryce's smile widened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Practical? Absolutely. We have some amazing SUVs here. The Stellaris 7000, for example. Fully loaded. Leather interior, panoramic sunroof. We could get you in that today." He gestured grandly toward a gleaming, chrome-laden vehicle that looked like it belonged on a movie set, not a farm. Agnes's eyes widened. That seems expensive. Expensive? No, my dear. It's an investment. In yourself. Bryce clapped his hands together. Come on, let's take a look. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how affordable luxury can be. He started steering her toward the SUV, already calculating the commission. He ignored her quiet protests about gas mileage and practicality, lost in the fantasy of the deal he was about to close. Upselling and insults. And the panoramic sunroof, Mrs. Meadowsweet, Bryce drawled, running a manicured hand along the glass. Think of the sunsets. Or the moonroof. Just picture yourself bathing in moonlight while the world glides by. He paused, letting his gaze drift from the sunroof to Agnes, a smirk playing on his lips. Of course, that's only if you opt for the premium package with the Starlight headliner. A bit more, but well worth it for the ambience. Agnes blinked, the sheer volume of chrome and leather assaulting her senses. It's a very impressive, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The new car smell, usually so appealing, felt suffocating in this opulent vehicle. She preferred the comforting aroma of beeswax and old books. But I was rather hoping to see the pre-owned sedans. The blue one, perhaps, that was advertised online. Bryce's smile tightened, the corners crinkling into something less genuine. He leaned against the hood of the SUV, crossing his arms. Mrs. Meadowsweet, with all due respect, are you sure you wouldn't rather experience the pinnacle of automotive engineering? This is a vehicle that makes a statement. It's a reflection of... He trailed off, his eyes scanning Agnes's simple dress and sensible shoes. Well, it speaks for itself, doesn't it? Agnes felt a flush creep up her neck. I understand, but my needs are quite modest. A reliable car for errands and visiting friends is all I require. Something practical. Bryce chuckled. A low, dismissive sound. Practicality is all well and good, Mrs. Meadowsweet, but one must also consider image. Wouldn't you agree? And let's be honest, driving something lesser might send the wrong message. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Especially in this town. Everyone knows everyone, and appearances, well, they can be deceiving, can't they? He gave her a knowing look that made Agnes feel as if she were underdressed and out of place. Her hands clenched slightly at her sides. She had never been one for extravagant displays of wealth, finding true value in simpler things. But Bryce's words stung, not because of the cost, but because of the judgment. I'm sure the pre-owned sedans are perfectly adequate for my needs, Agnes said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Perhaps we could take a look at them now? Bryce sighed theatrically. All right, Mrs. Meadowsweet, if you insist. Though I must say, I doubt you'll find anything on this lot within your budget. But who am I to judge? He gestured towards the back of the dealership with a dismissive wave. Follow me. Prepare to be underwhelmed. Escorted out. Actually, Agnes said, her voice surprisingly firm despite the tremor in her hands. I'd really like to see the silver sedan you mentioned earlier, the pre-owned one. Bryce Harrington's smile faltered, the practiced charm momentarily cracking like cheap veneer. Seriously? After all that? You're going to waste my time on that. He gestured dismissively towards the expansive lot visible through the showroom window, a sea of gleaming SUVs and luxury coupes baking under the midday sun. That thing's practically a dinosaur. It's probably got more miles on it than you have wrinkles. Agnes's cheeks flushed. She ignored the jab, focusing on the image of the practical, unpretentious car she envisioned. I appreciate you showing me these lovely vehicles, but I need something sensible, fuel-efficient, reliable. Bryce's eyes narrowed. Reliable? Lady, you look like you couldn't reliably boil an egg. This isn't some charity case. We deal in quality here. High-end machines, not relics. He puffed out his chest, the name tag on his tailored suit glinting under the fluorescent lights. I have the money, Agnes said quietly, the words laced with a sudden, steel-like resolve. I just want to see the sedan. A vein throbbed in Bryce's forehead. He leaned in close, his cologne, a cloying mix of sandalwood and something metallic, filling Agnes's nostrils. You know what I think? I think you're just here to mess with me. Some kind of sick game. You probably can't even afford the tires on a car like that. You're wasting my valuable time I could be spending with a real customer. He spun around, bellowing towards the reception desk. Security. We have a loiter. Escort this person off the premises. Immediately, Agnes felt a wave of dizziness. The polished floor seemed to tilt beneath her sensible shoes. Two hulking men in dark uniforms materialized beside her, their faces impassive. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," one of them said, his voice a low rumble. Humiliation burned in Agnes's throat. She wanted to scream, to argue, to demand to speak to a manager. But the words wouldn't come. She simply nodded, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The security guards flanked her, their presence stifling. The other customers, those who had been casually observing the spectacle, averted their gazes. Agnes felt 100 pairs of eyes boring into her back as she was ushered towards the exit, the automatic doors hissing open to release her into the harsh glare of the afternoon sun. She stumbled onto the sidewalk, the heat radiating off the asphalt a physical manifestation of her shame. The roar of traffic on the adjacent highway seemed to mock her. She was out, escorted out, a simple woman who dared to want a simple car. The billionaire's wife. The gravel crunched under the Bentley's tires as Agnes pulled into the circular drive. The house, a sprawling Cotswold manor transplanted to Connecticut, felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to someone else's life. She sighed, the air catching in her throat. Even the scent of the blooming wisteria, usually so comforting, seemed to mock her today. "Thank you, Edgar," she mumbled, stepping out of the car. The familiar weight of the diamond bracelet on her wrist felt like a shackle. Edgar, ever the professional, merely nodded. "Will you be requiring anything further this afternoon, Mrs. Meadowsweet?" Agnes shook her head, her gaze fixed on the imposing oak door. "No, thank you, Edgar. Just let Mr. Meadowsweet know I'm back." He inclined his head again. "Of course, madam." As Agnes walked towards the house, Edgar pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, a frown etching itself onto his usually impassive face. He tapped on a name and held the phone to his ear. "Sir Edgar here. Mrs. Meadowsweet has returned. She seemed rather downcast, sir. I believe she went to Prestige Motors this afternoon. As you requested I drive her there. Apparently, she wasn't treated very well. They refused to sell her a vehicle. I understand the general manager, a Mr. Harrison, was quite dismissive." Edgar paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yes, sir. I'll await further instructions." He ended the call, his expression unreadable. Inside the house, Agnes wandered through the echoing halls. The polished floors reflected her image back at her. A woman adrift in a sea of opulence. Charles, her husband, was a creature of habit. He'd be in the library, surrounded by first editions and the comforting aroma of aged leather. She braced herself and walked towards the heavy oak door. A wave of anxiety washed over her. She wasn't used to lying to Charles. But how could she explain her humiliation? He wouldn't understand her desire for something ordinary, something that felt like hers. Charles's ire. They what? The query, a low vibration in the still morning air, barely ruffled the tranquility of the veranda. Charles, bathed in the dawn's golden wash, watched his driver, Thomas, twist his cap like a penitent. "They informed Mrs. Agnes she didn't meet their criteria, sir. Suggested a used lot further down the road." Thomas's voice, a mere exhalation, drifted towards the manicured lawns. He kept his gaze fixed on a skein of birds carving circles in the cerulean sky. A palpable tension settled around Charles like a shroud. His usually serene blue eyes sharpened, mirroring the steely glint of a winter sky. The newspaper on his lap crinkled under the sudden pressure of his grip. Though outwardly still, an undercurrent of raw power surged from him. Thomas swallowed, recalling the few times he'd witnessed that particular expression, each a herald of considerable consequence. And did she identify herself? The question, though soft-spoken, carried an undeniable edge. "No, sir. She simply returned home." The tremble in Thomas's voice betrayed his worry. He knew how much Mrs. Agnes valued her autonomy, her aversion to leveraging Charles's influence. Charles's eyes closed briefly as he drew a long, measured breath. The birds, as if sensing the shift in the emotional landscape, scattered. When he opened them, the cold sharpness remained, now tempered with a resolute gleam. "Thank you, Thomas. That will be all." He observed Thomas's hasty retreat before reaching for the antique phone on the side table. The relic, a conduit to a bygone era, served as a private line to his investment firm. He tapped out the familiar sequence of numbers, the action betraying a suppressed vehemence. "Good morning, Mr. Thornton." A voice, polished and professional, answered instantly. "Eleanor, good morning. I require an acquisition. The entirety of the Thornton Automotive Group. All dealerships, every subsidiary, every asset. I want control. Expedite the process discreetly. Offer them double its valuation. Should they decline, triple it. If, inexplicably, they still resist." A thread of implacability laced his tone. "Construct an offer they cannot possibly refuse." The phone clicked softly as he replaced the receiver. The sun, indifferent to the unfolding drama, continued its ascent. Charles leaned back in his chair, a ghost of a smile gracing his lips. His gaze swept over the estate, a sprawling testament to his affluence and dominion. He rarely exercised it, preferring a simple life with Agnes. But to disrespect her, to dismiss her based on superficial judgment, they were about to discover that appearances could be profoundly misleading. They would soon appreciate that Agnes's worth eclipsed all the chrome and polished steel in their vainglorious showrooms. The Rolls-Royce Phantom, the sun, now higher in the sky, beat down on the polished forecourt of Prestige Motors, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. Bryce Harrington, nursing a lukewarm coffee and a simmering resentment for the previous day's time-waster, watched the Rolls-Royce Phantom glide to a stop before the showroom doors. Its sheer presence seemed to suck the air out of the parking lot, silencing the hum of passing traffic and momentarily overshadowing even the gleaming Jaguars on display. The Phantom was obsidian black, reflecting the harsh sunlight like a malevolent mirror. Its chrome accents winked, and the spirit of ecstasy atop the grille seemed to survey the scene with regal disdain. Bryce straightened his tie, a flicker of genuine interest finally piercing his bad mood. This was more like it. A real prospect, someone who understood the meaning of prestige. From the driver's seat emerged a figure as meticulously crafted as the car itself. The chauffeur was tall and lean, clad in a dark gray suit that looked tailored on Seville Row. His shoes gleamed like polished onyx, and his face was an impassive mask. He moved with a quiet efficiency, opening the rear door with a practiced sweep of his hand. Bryce, forgetting his vow to take his time and assess the situation, practically bounded towards the car. The opportunity was too good to pass up. "Good morning," he chirped, his voice oozing with a practiced charm he usually reserved for hedge fund managers and visiting dignitaries. "Welcome to Prestige Motors. How may I be of assistance?" He extended a hand, his Rolex glinting in the sun. The chauffeur remained unmoved, his gaze fixed somewhere just beyond Bryce's shoulder. His voice, when it came, was smooth and devoid of any inflection. "My employer will be with you shortly." He stepped back, folding his hands behind his back with an almost unnerving stillness, leaving Bryce hanging. His hand extended in a gesture that now felt absurdly eager. Bryce, momentarily flustered, recovered quickly. He plastered a smile back on his face. Of course. Please take your time. We have a wide selection of, well, I'm sure we can find something to suit even the most discerning taste." He gestured towards the showroom with a sweep of his arm, hoping the Phantom's owner was watching and appreciating his attentiveness. The day, it seemed, might not be a complete write-off after all. He just hoped whoever emerged from the back of that Rolls wasn't another Agnes. The Worthington fleet. Bryce Harrington felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. The chauffeur, a man whose suit looked more expensive than Bryce's entire inventory of used sedans, had just finished outlining the specifications for what could only be described as a fleet. Not just any fleet, but a Worthington fleet. As in, the Worthingtons. "And finally," the chauffeur continued, his voice a smooth baritone, "Mrs. Worthington insists on impeccable ethical standards. No hidden fees, no inflated prices, and absolutely no condescending treatment towards any member of her staff who may be sent to collect or service the vehicles." Bryce swallowed hard. Ethical standards? At his dealership? It was a concept as foreign as Martian soil. But the vision of the commission danced in his head, a figure with so many zeros it made his palms sweat. He plastered on his most sincere, trustworthy smile. "Of course, sir. Ethical conduct is our top priority. We pride ourselves on transparency and fair dealing. Consider it done." He'd worry about the details later. He could always motivate his sales team to be a little less themselves. The chauffeur raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Good. Because any deviation from these standards will result in the immediate termination of the contract and, I assure you, consequences you would rather avoid." He pulled out a slim silver phone. One moment, Bryce watched, mesmerized, as the chauffeur held the phone to his ear, saying nothing. He imagined some faceless Worthington executive on the other end, silently judging him. Then, the chauffeur spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Sir, he has agreed to all terms." A pause. "Understood." He lowered the phone. "Mr. Harrington," he said, his gaze unwavering. "There's one last thing. Mrs. Worthington wishes you to know who she is." Bryce's heart pounded. This was it. He was about to become intimately acquainted with the woman who held the key to his financial salvation. "Yes, of course. I'm all ears." The chauffeur straightened his already impeccable tie. "The woman you so rudely dismissed yesterday? The one you called simple?" He paused, letting the word hang in the air like a particularly foul odor. "That was Mrs. Worthington. Her name is Agnes. Justice and a new sedan." Bryce Harrington's face felt stretched taut, the smile glued on like a poorly fitted mask. He watched the Worthington's Lincolntown car pull away, the promise of a fleet sale still shimmering in his grasp. He could practically taste the bonus. He turned back towards the showroom, his ears still ringing with Mrs. Worthington's brittle laughter and Mr. Worthington's backslapping congratulations. Then, the Rolls-Royce, a silver behemoth that dwarfed his entire inventory, purred to a stop directly in front of the dealership. A uniformed chauffeur emerged, crisp and unsmiling. He approached Bryce with an air of quiet authority that made Bryce want to shuffle his feet. "Mr. Harrington?" The chauffeur's voice was a low rumble. "Mrs. Meadowsweet requests your immediate presence." Bryce puffed out his chest. "Mrs. Meadowsweet? I don't believe I have any appointments." He trailed off, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes. The woman from yesterday?" The chauffeur's expression didn't change. "Indeed, Mrs. Agnes Meadowsweet. She is here to discuss the discriminatory treatment she received yesterday. Furthermore, she has brought to the attention of the dealership's board of directors your less than exemplary customer service record." They arrived on site approximately 10 minutes ago and have been reviewing security camera footage and complaints. Before Bryce could stammer out a denial, two stern-faced individuals in impeccably tailored suits emerged from the dealership, flanking a woman with a severe bun and a clipboard. "Bryce Harrington," the woman barked, her voice echoing across the lot. "You are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises." Bryce's carefully constructed world crumbled. He sputtered, he protested, but the woman was unmoved. As security guards, smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation, led him away, he caught a glimpse of Agnes Meadowsweet stepping out of the Rolls-Royce. She was no longer wearing the simple cotton dress. Today, she was dressed in a tailored suit the color of cream, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She moved with a newfound confidence, her gaze sweeping over the dealership with an air of quiet assessment. Agnes addressed the remaining staff, her voice clear and firm. "I appreciate the board's swift action. However, my visit is not merely about retribution. It is about ensuring that this dealership, and indeed all dealerships, treat every customer with respect, regardless of their appearance or presumed financial status. I want to see concrete changes in policy, mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, and a commitment to fair and equitable service." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. "I accept your apologies. However, I will be purchasing my pre-owned sedan elsewhere." Later that afternoon, Agnes drove away from a different dealership, a small, family-owned business on the other side of town. The car, a meticulously maintained silver Toyota Camry, gleamed in the afternoon sun. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't extravagant, but it was exactly what she wanted. As she pulled onto the highway, Agnes smiled. Justice, it seemed, could be a surprisingly satisfying thing. And a new sedan was a bonus.